My brother died when I was 8. He was 14. His name was Caleb. It happened one winter afternoon, while I was inside watching cartoons and trying to ignore the cold. He had gone down to the reservoir by himself. The one just past the bend, down the hill from our street. They said he slipped on the frozen edge. The ice cracked, and no one saw until it was too late. That was 12 years ago. Since then, my parents never changed a thing in his room. Not one curtain, not one shelf. It became a kind of suspended world, still, silent, untouched. At first, they kept the door open like it might let in some part of him. But after a few months, they closed it. Locked it, even. Like sealing a jar of grief they couldn't look at anymore. That room stayed shut until the morning I left for college. My parents were downstairs. I was packing in my room when I caught myself staring across the hall. The door was cracked open just a little. I swear it wasn't like that the night before. I didn't plan anything dramatic. I just wanted to grab a hoodie or maybe a keepsake. Something to hold on to in the unfamiliar. I'd been in there before, quietly, respectfully. A few times as a teenager, I'd sit on his bed or run my fingers along the dusty spine of his books. It always felt like trespassing, but part of me needed to. I missed him. Still do. This time, though, I opened the bottom drawer of his dresser. I don't know why. Maybe I thought there'd be old baseball cards or a childhood toy. Instead, I found 3 DVDs, blank white cases, marked only in faded Sharpie, 1, 2, and 3. We haven't had a DVD player in years, except for the one in his old room, still hooked up to his ancient TV. My first instinct was to leave them. But the second I touched them, I felt something tighten in my chest. Not fear. Not curiosity. Something like gravity. I carried them over to the TV, sat cross-legged on the floor, and inserted the first disc. It began with static, then resolved, barely, into grainy, shifting footage. A room. I think it was our living room, but something was wrong. The furniture looked stretched, like reflections in warped glass. Sometimes it looked like my parents' bedroom. Sometimes it flickered into a hallway I didn't recognize. There were voices. Familiar ones. I heard my mother laughing, the clink of plates, and the unmistakable sound of Caleb's voice calling out something I couldn't make out. Then another voice. Low, slow, too close to the mic. You haven't noticed yet. I froze. Then the screen cut to black. At first, I tried to convince myself it was some weird old home video, or maybe a corrupted school project. But we never had a video camera growing up. And the date burned into the corner of the screen said. September 3, 2016. Caleb drowned in January of the same year. I rewound it, trying to convince myself the timestamp was a mistake. Some glitch. But it stayed. And then, just before the laughter kicked in again, a subtitle blinked onto the bottom of the screen, faint, yellowed, like it had been scorched into the image. Watch again. And something else, just as the screen flickered out again. In the last half second of static, the footage froze on a mirror in the background. My brother was standing in it. But there was no camera. He was staring straight ahead. Right at me. I didn't sleep that night. I turned the TV off, but the screen stayed lit longer than it should have, glowing faintly in that sickly pale blue way old CRTs do. I sat there for a while, just staring at it, the disc still spinning softly in the tray. Then I yanked it out and shoved all 3 DVDs back in the drawer. Slammed it shut like that would seal whatever I'd just let out. By the time I got back to my room, the house felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just watched. You know that feeling when someone's reading over your shoulder, and you can't see them, but your body knows? It was like that. And then the dream started. I must have fallen asleep sometime just before dawn, because the next thing I remember is a voice whispering right into my ear, not from the outside, but from inside my skull. It said, very clearly, "You paused it. But not in time." I woke up soaked in sweat, my heart pounding. The house was silent except for the usual drip of the upstairs bathroom faucet. But it sounded wrong. Off-tempo. Like it was mimicking the rhythm of something else. Breathing, maybe. I didn't go back into Caleb's room that morning. I told myself I had too much packing to do, too many goodbyes to say. But the truth is I was scared of what I'd see if I put in the second disc. I left for college later that afternoon. 3 hours into the drive, my phone buzzed with a text from my mom. "Did you go into Caleb's room?" I stared at the screen for a long time, not sure how to reply. Eventually, I wrote back. "Yeah, just grabbed some of his old hoodies." "Why?" There was a long pause before her response came through. "Did you move the mirror?" I hadn't. When I asked what she meant, she just sent a photo. It was the same old standing mirror Caleb always had, still positioned at the far corner of the room. But now, its surface was black. Not reflective, like it had been painted over or filled with ink. I zoomed in. And saw something faint in the glass. A pale smudge in the shape of a handprint. On the inside. I spent that night in my dorm trying to forget. I told myself it was grief. That my brain was playing tricks on me, making patterns from static and shadows. But at 2:11 a.m. my phone vibrated again. It was a video. No message. Just the file. The sender ID was blank. I pressed play. At first, just darkness. Then, a quiet crackling sound, like old vinyl. And then Caleb's voice, soft, echoing like it was being played backward. I didn't drown. The video cut off. I threw my phone across the room. For a long time I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, afraid to close my eyes. Because in the silence, behind the distant hum of campus lights and hallway chatter, I could still hear it. That whisper, lodged deep inside the static of my thoughts. Play the second disc. I lasted 6 days. I tried everything, deleted the video, shut off my phone, dove into classes, clubs, anything that kept me away from empty rooms and quiet hours. But it wasn't enough. The whisper didn't leave. It just got smarter. It started hiding inside things. I'd hear it in the rustle of notebook pages, in the low buzz between songs, in the hollow pause between my professor's sentences. Not loud. Not even clear. But always there. So I went home for the weekend. Told my parents I forgot a textbook, but they knew something was off. My mom kept glancing at me like I might start speaking in tongues. My dad barely looked up from his paper. That night, after they went to bed, I unlocked Caleb's room again. Same as before. Dusty, silent, stale with the scent of old wood and time. But now the mirror was covered with a sheet. I didn't touch it. I went straight to the dresser. DVD 2. When I slid it into the player, my hands were already shaking. The screen went black. Then slowly, almost reluctantly, it flickered on. The footage was clearer this time. No static. Just a fixed shot of our backyard, bathed in late afternoon sun. I could see the rusted swing set, the garden hose that always curled like a snake, and the old fence with the missing slat. Then, Caleb walked into frame. He looked exactly as I remembered him, thin, tan, a mop of black curls falling into his eyes. He sat on the swing, facing away from the camera, swaying gently. No sound. Just wind. I leaned forward, breath caught in my throat. He didn't look ghostly. He looked real. More real than anything I'd seen in a long time. Then, behind him, something moved. It stepped out from behind the tree line, a tall figure, dressed in gray. Blurred, somehow, like the camera couldn't hold it in focus. It didn't walk. It tilted forward in short, halting movements. Like a puppet trying to mimic a memory of how humans move. I wanted to stop the video. I didn't. Caleb never turned around. Never flinched. The figure stopped behind him. Slowly raised an arm, too long, bent at the wrong angle, and pointed at the camera. And then Caleb finally spoke. Without turning, he said, almost cheerfully. "I told you not to wait so long." The footage glitched. For a split second, the entire frame inverted. The backyard became a dark, frozen lake. Caleb was no longer on the swing, he was under the ice, staring up. Eyes open. Mouth moving. The words burned into the corner of the screen again. "You paused it. But it didn't pause you." And then the audio came back. But not from the speakers, from behind me. Just one sound. Footsteps. On carpet. I spun around, heart slamming, but the room was empty. I stayed frozen for what felt like minutes. Then I turned back to the screen. The video was still playing, but now the swing was empty. The yard was dark. And reflected faintly in the screen, I could see my own face. But I wasn't alone. Something was standing behind me. I ran. Didn't even eject the disc. Just bolted across the hall and locked myself in the bathroom. My legs gave out. I slid down the door, hands clamped over my mouth like that could somehow hold everything in, my breath, my fear, my sanity. I stayed there until sunrise. When I finally stepped out, the hallway was quiet again. Too quiet. Like sound hadn't come back yet. Caleb's door was shut. And the TV was off. Later that day, I made myself a deal, I wouldn't destroy the DVDs. I'd finish them. All 3. Then I'd be done. Like ripping off a bandage, or severing a limb to stop the spread of something worse. But first, I needed answers. So I went digging. Back in the garage, buried under yellowing boxes and rusted tools, I found a battered cardboard bin marked, camcorder stuff, in my dad's handwriting. I didn't remember us ever having one. But there it was, an old Sony Handycam, tapes inside, some labeled, most not. And beneath it all, wedged under a roll of old extension cord, was a folded scrap of paper. It was a receipt. A single-line item. Sony DCR TRV 103. Purchased February 14, 17. That was over a year after Caleb's death. But that wasn't the worst part. Scrawled in pen, across the back of the receipt, in handwriting that didn't match either of my parents, were 5 words. "You kept rewinding the wrong part." That night, I didn't tell my parents I was staying. I just waited until the house went still, crept back into Caleb's room, and sat in front of the TV again. The 3rd disc sat on top of the player now. I hadn't left it there. I didn't question it. I pressed play. At first, it was black. Then static. But not visual, auditory. A dense, layered wall of distortion, like breathing through water, whispering through gravel. My ears ached, but I didn't flinch. The image returned. It was me. Sitting cross-legged in Caleb's room. On the floor. Wearing the same clothes I was wearing now. I wasn't moving. But behind me, framed in the mirror, I was. The second version of me stood in the mirror's reflection, slightly out of sync. A half-second lag. A delay between action and reaction, like watching a live feed caught in feedback. I watched myself lean in, mouth opening slightly, as if to whisper something. Then, over the speakers, a voice. "You've been here before." The me on screen blinked. "Every time you leave, you forget." Then the mirror version stepped forward. Toward the frame. Toward the camera. "But I remember." The screen cut to black. And from inside the TV, from somewhere deeper than any speaker could reach, the final whisper came. Play it again. I didn't sleep. Again. It wasn't just fear this time. It was something worse, recognition. That feeling you get when you walk into a room and forget why you came in, only this time it stretched backwards for years. Like I'd been circling this moment forever without knowing it. I kept seeing my reflection from the screen, that not quite me leaning closer. And I kept hearing that final line. Play it again. But when I returned to Caleb's room the next morning, the disc was gone. All three were. The drawer was empty. The mirror, uncovered. And for the first time in 12 years, it was clear. No dust. No handprint. Just that cold, perfect reflection of the space behind me. But not of me. I wasn't in it. I waved my hand. Nothing. I leaned in close, heart rattling in my throat. Still nothing. It was like the mirror was reflecting the room before I walked in. Or after I left. Then something passed through the background. Not a shape, not exactly. More like the suggestion of motion. A ripple across a still surface. A glitch in the memory of the room. I reached out. Not to touch the glass. But to knock. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I expected it to echo. Maybe I thought it'd make the moment real. But instead of a hollow tap, the sound came back different. Answered. Like something knocked back. From the inside. 3 slow, deliberate raps. I stumbled back. Knocked over the chair beside the bed. That's when I saw it, wedged beneath the legs, sticking out like it had been placed there. A 4th DVD. No number. No label. Just a strip of black tape running across the front, and written in white pen. Start over. I stared at it for a long time. Told myself not to. But some part of me already knew I would. I slid it into the tray and pressed play. This time, there was no static. Just a sharp, sudden click, like a tape recorder snapping on. Then, Caleb's face. Full screen. Up close. Eyes wide and empty. Not lifeless. Just hollow. Like the version of him I tried not to remember. The version they pulled from the lake. The version I never got to say goodbye to. But then, he blinked. And smiled. Not sweetly. Not cruelly. Just knowingly. And then he whispered something I couldn't hear. I leaned closer. Pressed my ear to the speaker. And he said it again. You're the one who drowned. I didn't scream. Not because I wasn't terrified, I was. I was shaking, sweating, mouth open with a noise that never came out. But that sentence, you're the one who drowned, didn't hit like a horror movie twist. It hit like truth. A memory I wasn't supposed to have. Or maybe one I'd already forgotten too many times. I rewound the disc. Watched Caleb's face again. Every blink, every muscle twitch. The way his head tilted as he whispered those words, like he was reminding me of something we used to joke about. I played it again. And again. Each time, the lighting changed. Just slightly. At first, he was lit by sunlight. Then lamp light. Then flickering blue light. Then no light at all, just his pale face hovering in the dark. Every version of the clip was slightly different. As if the footage was shifting depending on how I watched it. As if I was choosing which truth to remember. Later that night, I sat with my parents at dinner. Everything looked the same, Mom's faded sweater, Dad's old notepad next to his plate. But it all felt slightly off. The air, the way their forks moved, the distance between our voices. Halfway through the meal, I asked. Do you remember Caleb's funeral? My mom froze. My dad looked up slowly, eyes narrowed. Then they both spoke at once. Whose? I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. Instead, I dug out an old shoebox from my closet, the one I hadn't touched in years. It was filled with childhood junk, friendship bracelets, worn Pokemon cards, a photo strip from a fair. And tucked into the bottom, a newspaper clipping. I don't remember keeping it. But it was mine. Local teen drowns in ice collapse, January 12, 2016. I scanned the article 3 times before I saw it. The name. It wasn't Caleb's. It was mine. I ran to the mirror. Stared. Waited. And this time, I was there. But something else was, too. Behind me. Again. But now I could see it clearly for the first time. It was Caleb. But not the Caleb I remembered. His face was older. Paler. His eyes too deep. Like he'd been aging somewhere else. And he was smiling. Not in a comforting way. In a relieved way. As if I had finally said what he was waiting to hear. Then he whispered, mouth moving in the reflection, no sound at all. Ready to trade back? I didn't answer. Not out loud. Because part of me, maybe the only real part, already knew the deal had been made long ago. This wasn't new. This wasn't a haunting. It was a loop. A switch. Something I must have agreed to, or begged for, in a moment too shattered to remember. The mirror shimmered faintly, like water touched by wind. Caleb's reflection stepped forward again, inch by inch, his eyes locked on mine. Not menacing, just patient. Like he'd been doing this for a very long time. And maybe he had. I backed away. The reflection stayed. Then it raised one hand. Pressed it flat to the inside of the glass. I didn't move. But my hand lifted anyway. Pressed itself to the surface. A perfect mirror. Except, it wasn't mine. The scar on my knuckle was gone. And Caleb's was back. I woke up on the floor. Head pounding, breath shallow, like I'd been held underwater for hours. My mouth tasted like iron. The TV was off. The mirror was empty. And everything felt shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough that the wrongness ran under the surface like a whisper under a song. I checked my phone. I had missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, area codes I didn't know. One of the voicemails was only static. The other was silence. But not empty. There was a breath. Just one. Mine. Or his. I didn't check the DVDs. I didn't check the mirror. I went outside. The air was thick. Not humid, dense. Like walking through someone else's memory. The world looked normal, but the shadows were all wrong. Too long. Moving slightly in the corners of my eyes. And when I passed the lake. The one Caleb died in. Or I did. There was something new. A reflection on the surface. A boy sitting at the edge. Legs in the water. Laughing. But there was no one there. Not in the real world. Only in the water. And when I stepped closer, he turned. Looked right at me. And mouthed 3 words. You stayed too long. I don't know how long I stood there at the lake. The wind barely moved. The boy in the reflection, who used to be me, or Caleb, or something else entirely, just sat there, legs swinging beneath the surface like time meant nothing. Eventually, the reflection blinked. But I didn't. That's when I knew. I wasn't the one standing on the shore anymore. I was the one being watched. I ran. Not home. Not back to the room. I drove. Didn't pack. Didn't tell my parents. Just got in the car and kept the gas pedal pressed down until the houses vanished, until the trees blurred, until the mirror hanging from my windshield showed a version of the road that wasn't quite the one I was on. Hours passed. Or didn't. I don't know. Eventually I stopped at a motel off the highway. One of those forgotten places with buzzing signs and numbers missing from the doors. Room 7 was the only one unlocked. Inside, there was a bed. A television. And on top of it, a DVD player. Already humming. Already waiting. The tray slid open when I entered. And there it was. A new disc. No label. No markings. But the screen had already loaded the first frame. My dorm room. Empty. Then, me, entering, eyes tired, backpack slung over one shoulder, dropping my keys on the desk like I'd done it 100 times. Except I hadn't. Not yet. And then my voice, clear and hollow, from inside the speakers. You never left. I stood there for a long time. Just breathing. And then I did the only thing I could. I pressed eject. Snapped the disc in half. Watched the pieces fall to the carpet. And for a moment, just a moment, I thought I heard something exhale. Something behind the walls. Not angry. Not even surprised. Just, disappointed. I never went back. Not to the lake. Not to that room. But every now and then, I'll catch my reflection moving a half-second too slow. Or I'll find a DVD tucked inside the back of a cabinet I know I emptied. Or I'll hear laughter, familiar, mine, echoing from a screen that was never on. And sometimes, late at night, when the faucet drips just wrong, I hear him. Knocking. From the other side of the glass. Still waiting. Still smiling. Still asking. Ready to trade back.